Well, I think it's great. It's a great climate for Western investors, and let me speak only of Americans. By the way, we should say that Americans compared to Germans and others are not big investors in Russia. I mean, Americans talk about, well, we will invest in Russia. Nobody will. No, no. We're already at the end of the line, and if we want to be leading investors, we have to get going. But let me just speak about Americans, because the frame of mind in America is somewhat different in Europe. Because Europe, you know, America is not a European country. That's very, very important. For all the talk of globalization, most Americans don't have passports, do not speak foreign languages. Europeans is quite contrary. I mean, when I go to Moscow, there seem to be Germans speaking Russian everywhere, everywhere. Businessmen, intellectuals, writers, engineers, students. I think Russia for American investors is an enormous future if the American investors have the right frame of mind. Too many American investors early on thought you go to Russia, you make a fantastic fortune at high risk, and you get out. You get out. They're going to fail. They're going to fail. It's complicated to invest in Russia, and you can't be in a hurry. You have to plan carefully. You have to choose good Russian partners who themselves are not corrupt. You have to make it clear from the beginning that you will not engage in any kind of corruption, not only because you're a good person, because it's against American law. The Foreign Corruption Practices Act of the United States prohibits Americans from engaging in corrupt economic behavior in other countries. So you simply say that. I could go to jail for what I do in your country. I'm not going to do it. You establish that. Secondly, whatever your pursuit, if it's food processing, or if it's providing services, or it's drilling for oil, or it's, Russia has a lot of gold and diamonds, which are going to be in the international market soon. Russia needs partners because Russia needs capital and technology. You have to go in for the long term. You know, if you own a business and you're going to Russia, say, I'm going to give this to my children. I'm building this in Russia for my children. Because Russia will get better and better. A lot of its trajectories, its signs, it had bad demographic, its population was shrinking, now it's moving upward. The health of Russians was terrible, now it's improving. The school system had collapsed, now it's trying to find its way back. There are a lot of political problems in Russia with terrorists, but that's true in Israel and in France and in the United States. You have to take the longer view. But if you know your business, if you go in with a professional point of view, and you behave in Russia as you do in the United States, as an honorable businessman and investor, or as you do in other countries, there are so many opportunities. So many. I mean, Russia is so big, it has so many resources. We forget, because we talk only about natural gas and oil, that in addition to holding more reserves than any other country in the world of those essential resources, Russia has a disproportionate share of diamonds, gold, timber, iron, coal, and often forgotten, what is now becoming a scarce resource, Russia has the largest reserve of fresh water in the world. That said, the opportunity, and of course an emerging consumer market, people who, if increasingly will have money to buy what everybody wants to buy. On the other hand, Russia in this regard actually does not need us. We have to make the case that we are good economic partners. It's thought by corporate Americans and political Americans that Russia needs us. Russia doesn't need us. Russia needs only one thing from America: nuclear security. Everything else, capital investment, technology, business partners, it can get in Europe and increasingly in China and increasingly in Japan. The Chinese and the Russians, the German and the Russians, the Japanese and the Russians, the French and the Russians are very busy doing all the economic things that Americans are still scratching their heads and thinking about. Russia doesn't need us. They don't need American resources, capital, or know-how to modernize Russia. They can do that with other modern countries. So we need to make the case to Russia. Why us? And that's where the politics get in the way. With Romney saying Russia's the #1 enemy, and Obama unable to think through his own reset policy and make it real, Russians don't think of us as reliable people. That we break our promise. We said we wouldn't expand the NATO, then we did. We said we wouldn't go beyond a no-fly zone over Libya, then we bombed Gaddafi. We look, in the Russian mind, our government, capricious, unreliable, unlike the Chinese and the Germans and the French. So we need to work on that, and businessmen need to talk to their own government, to the American government, and explain this, that we need a stable, reliable political atmosphere with Russia if we're going to be able to invest. And they have to explain to the Russians that they, these American economic partners, are reliable. After that, I mean, it's part of the future. It's not the only future, but it's exciting, it's interesting, it's a cultural experience like no other. You meet a lot of wonderful people in Russia. It could be a nice and interesting place to live and even raise American children for a few years. I mean, lots of us have done it. So yeah, I think that this is something that corporate America, and not just corporations, but individual businessmen who have resources to use abroad, need to think about very carefully. But again, always remembering that the Russians do not need us. They can get what we have from somebody else. So you can't be arrogant and say, oh, I'll save you.